What if waking up tired and hitting a physical wall by mid-afternoon is not a normal part of getting older? What if it is the direct result of what modern agriculture has done to our daily food? The commercial food industry systematically stripped the slow-burning cellular fuel from our grains. They replaced it with hyper-refined flours engineered to spike our blood sugar and leave us chronically exhausted just a few hours later. But the ancient world ran on a completely different kind of fuel. Today we are uncovering 10 ancient grains designed for relentless physical stamina. Stick around because there is a young fire-scorched grain coming up that acts like a biological drip feed for your muscles. Item 10. Foxtail millet. The earliest medical texts of ancient India describe a very specific food given to men performing grueling manual labor under the harsh sun. Both the Karaka Samhita and ancient Chinese agricultural records document foxtail millet as a foundational food for workers needing to sustain extreme physical effort all day. Workers who needed to keep moving all day without breaking down depended on it. The secret to this ancient resilience lies in a significant concentration of a mineral called magnesium. Magnesium acts as a physical relaxant for the pathways carrying blood through your body. When you perform heavy physical work, your muscles demand constant oxygen to keep moving. If your blood pathways are tense and constricted, your muscles starve and you hit a wall of deep exhaustion. Magnesium gently opens those pathways wide to ensure a steady and uninterrupted flow of oxygen reaches your working muscles exactly when they need it most. Muscle oxygenation and endurance capacity increased by 17% during sustained physical exertion in people consuming a magnesium-rich diet. The European Journal of Clinical Nutrition published that finding in 2018. Ancient physicians understood exactly how to feed the human engine for maximum physical endurance. You can experience this by cooking a warm bowl of foxtail millet porridge instead of reaching for processed cereal before a heavy workday. A simple ancient seed holds the exact mineral required to keep your muscles breathing under load. Ancient Indian laborers relied on foxtail millet to keep their muscles oxygenated through a punishing day. The army that comes next was not working in the heat, it was fighting at altitude. And the seed that kept those warriors moving when the air itself ran out was not millet. Item 9. Quinoa. The armies of the ancient Incan Empire marched and fought at extreme altitudes that would leave a modern athlete completely incapacitated by oxygen deprivation. Historical military and labor records show these warriors sustained themselves over brutal mountain passes on large quantities of a tiny rugged seed called quinoa. This seed provided a profound level of stamina because it contains an unusually complete profile of protein-building blocks, specifically one called isoleucine. When you push your body through intense physical labor, you are constantly creating microscopic tears in your muscle fibers. Isoleucine acts like a biological repair crew that rushes to those tiny injuries and patches them while you are still moving. This continuous repair process prevents the muscle fatigue that forces most people to stop and rest. Athletes consuming this specific protein-building block experienced a 33% reduction in physical exhaustion markers during prolonged endurance events. The Journal of Sports Sciences published that result in 2011. Ancient armies kept moving when the air was thin and the terrain was hostile. Prepare a cold quinoa salad with olive oil and vegetables for lunch before a day on your feet. A seed that carried entire armies over the Andes Mountains is more than capable of getting you through a difficult afternoon. Incan warriors carried quinoa over mountain passes too steep for most living things to survive. The grain that follows was not carried by warriors. It survived something else entirely. A storm violent enough to level an entire nation's food supply. Item 8. Spelt. The 9th chapter of Exodus describes a catastrophic plague of hail that completely devastated the agricultural infrastructure of the Egyptian Empire. The text notes that the flax and the barley were destroyed. The wheat and the spelt survived because they were late in coming up. That miraculous survival preserved a deeply protective grain that held the exact nutrient the ancient world needed to physically rebuild their broken nation. Spelt is incredibly dense with a crucial nutrient called niacin, which you might know as vitamin B3. This vitamin performs a very specific job inside your body. It directly converts the food you eat into the primary energy currency of your cells. It works like an ignition switch that translates a bowl of food into physical electricity. Your muscles use that electricity to lift and pull and carry heavy loads. Patients consuming high levels of dietary niacin showed a 24% improvement in sustained cellular energy output over 12 weeks. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published that finding in 2015. The grain God preserved through the storm was built to fuel the massive rebuilding effort that followed. You can find spelt flour in most natural food stores. Use it to replace highly processed white flour in your daily baking. The resilience of this ancient grain gets passed directly into your own physical stamina when you consume it. Spelt survived the storm that destroyed everything else in Egypt. The grain that comes next did not survive a storm. It was ground into bread and carried every day to the men building the monuments that would outlast all of recorded history. Item 7. Emmer wheat. The laborers who constructed the massive monuments of the ancient Egyptian empire required a staggering amount of daily physical endurance just to survive their work. Archaeological records from the workers' village at Deir el-Medina reveal that their primary daily ration was a thick, heavy bread. It was baked from an ancient grain called emmer wheat. They were not surviving on empty calories because emmer wheat is uniquely packed with a complex carbohydrate structure called resistant starch. Resistant starch is a type of food that your stomach cannot easily break down. It travels completely intact into your lower digestive tract, where it feeds the bacterial community living in your gut. Those bacteria consume the starch and produce specialized fats that act as a slow and steady biological fuel for your entire body. That fuel continues releasing for hours after your meal is finished. Consuming high amounts of resistant starch increased physical endurance and delayed the onset of muscular exhaustion by over 20%. Nutrients published that finding in 2019. The men moving massive stones under a desert sun were powered by a biological mechanism that modern bread completely lacks. You can seek out whole emmer wheat berries and boil them until tender to use as a hearty base for your evening meals. We traded the grain that built the ancient world for a cheap modern substitute that leaves us exhausted by noon. The ancient grain fueling the pyramid builders physically alters the bacterial community in your gut to produce lasting stamina. If you are ready to rethink your modern bread, subscribe to the channel right now. You absolutely need to hear about the fire-scorched grain coming up in Item 4. The pyramid builders were sustained by a grain that physically altered how their bodies produced fuel. The people who come next were not building monuments. They were surviving something harder, a climate that killed everything else. Item 6. Sorghum. Ancient agricultural communities across the African continent faced punishing heat and relentless cycles of drought that tested the limits of human endurance. Archaeological records show they relied heavily on a remarkably tough grain called sorghum to sustain their daily labor. Other crops withered and died in the sun. Sorghum did not. This grain did not just survive the heat. It actively protected the people who ate it through a rare class of protective plant compounds called 3-deoxyanthocyanidins. These compounds actively hunt down and neutralize the biological exhaust that builds up in your muscle tissue when you work hard. They act like a cooling system for an overheated engine, pulling the internal heat and swelling out of your muscles. That lets you recover quickly and wake up ready to work the next day. Consuming these specific sorghum compounds accelerated muscle recovery and measurably reduced markers of physical stress by 28% after heavy exertion. The Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry published that finding in 2014. Ancient farmers maintained their physical strength day after day in a brutal climate. Cook whole grain sorghum exactly like rice and serve it alongside roasted meats or vegetables for a deeply satisfying meal. The resilience this grain needed to survive the desert translates into rapid physical recovery for your own body. Sorghum kept African farmers working in a climate that destroyed other crops. The grain that follows did not just survive a hostile environment. The people who ate it became famous for an endurance the rest of the world could not explain. Item 5. Teff. The ancient highlanders of Ethiopia developed a reputation for possessing an almost supernatural level of physical endurance over long distances. Their stamina was built entirely on a microscopic seed called teff, which is widely considered the oldest cultivated grain on the African continent. This tiny seed is smaller than a grain of sand, but it holds a significant concentration of plant-based iron called non-heme iron. Iron is the essential building block your body uses to create red blood cells. Those red blood cells act like a fleet of delivery trucks, carrying oxygen from your lungs directly into your exhausted muscles. When you consume the specific iron found in teff, you are measurably increasing the size of that delivery fleet. Your muscles can receive a far steadier supply of oxygen during intense physical work. Female athletes consuming a teff-rich diet saw a 26% improvement in their oxygen-carrying capacity during sustained aerobic exercise. The International Journal of Sport Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism published that finding in 2018. The people who consume this ancient grain are recognized globally for their physical stamina. You can buy teff flour and use it to make a simple flatbread, or stir the whole seeds into your morning oatmeal. The smallest grain in the ancient world packs a remarkable amount of influence over how your body manages oxygen under pressure. Ethiopian highlanders consumed teff to push more oxygen into their muscles. The grain that comes next works from the opposite direction entirely. It does not increase the supply. It slows the consumption. Item 4. Freekeh. Ancient Middle Eastern physicians documented a very specific and unusual preparation method for wheat. It transformed a simple food into a potent medicine for endurance. They instructed farmers to harvest the wheat while it was still young and green. Then they carefully scorched it in an open fire to halt the maturation process. This fire-roasted grain is known as freekeh, and the scorching process creates a remarkably dense carbohydrate structure called fructooligosaccharides. This unique structure completely resists the rapid digestion that normally turns bread into a sudden spike of blood sugar. Instead, it breaks down slowly in your digestive tract, like a biological time-release capsule dripping steady energy into your bloodstream for hours. Roasted green wheat produced a measurably lower and more stable blood sugar response than regular wheat, significantly extending physical energy reserves. The British Journal of Nutrition detailed that finding in 2012. The ancient practice of burning the grain in the field was a brilliant way to engineer long-lasting stamina. You can find cracked freekeh in most Middle Eastern markets and boil it in chicken broth for a deeply savory and smoky side dish. A grain scorched by fire thousands of years ago is a powerful fuel to keep your own energy burning bright all afternoon. Freekeh was scorched in a field to lock in slow-burning fuel. The seed that follows did something similar for a completely different reason: high altitude, brutal terrain, and guides who needed every cell in their bodies receiving energy at maximum efficiency. Item 3. Buckwheat. Navigating the brutal mountain passes of the Himalayas required an incredible degree of physical hardiness and reliable sustained energy. Tang Dynasty records and ancient Tibetan historical accounts reveal that the guides and porters crossing these treacherous peaks relied almost exclusively on buckwheat. They trusted this specific food because it contains a very rare and powerful compound called D-chiro-inositol. This compound acts like a master key that unlocks the doors to your muscle cells. It optimizes exactly how your body absorbs and uses blood sugar. Instead of causing a sudden energetic crash, this compound drives the fuel directly into your muscles, where it is needed for sustained labor. Patients consuming this specific buckwheat compound saw a 19% improvement in how efficiently their cells processed and absorbed energy during physical stress. The Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry published that finding in 2015. Ancient mountain guides were surviving the altitude because their cells were locked open and receiving constant fuel. Swap your regular morning pancakes for hearty buckwheat pancakes to give your body a deep well of energy for the day ahead. The seed that carried mountain guides over the highest peaks on Earth has been shown to meaningfully support your daily energy reserves. Mountain guides in the Himalayas trusted buckwheat to keep their cells absorbing fuel. The seed that follows was trusted by warriors in two entirely separate hemispheres. They had no contact with each other. They arrived at the same botanical conclusion independently. Item 2. Amaranth. Ancient warriors across two entirely different hemispheres recognized the extraordinary physical power of one specific microscopic seed. Both the fierce Aztec military forces and the ancient Ayurvedic practitioners of India prized amaranth as a sacred food. Both believed it could instill immense strength and delay exhaustion during battle. This tiny seed commands such respect because it is uniquely rich in a specialized dietary fat called squalene. Squalene physically surrounds the outer walls of your cells and acts like a biological shield that actively protects your cellular membranes from the oxidative damage caused by intense physical exertion. By defending those membranes, it measurably delays the acid buildup that makes your muscles burn and give out during heavy work. Athletes supplementing with squalene experienced a 21% delay in the onset of muscle fatigue during high-intensity endurance testing. The European Journal of Applied Physiology published that finding in 2016. Ancient warriors were actively protecting their cells from the oxidative damage that causes muscles to break down during heavy exertion. Pop amaranth seeds in a dry skillet, just like miniature popcorn. Sprinkle them over your salads or soups for a crunchy and powerful nutrient boost. Warriors separated by thousands of miles independently discovered the exact same botanical secret for physical endurance. Ancient warriors on opposite sides of the earth were protecting their cells from breakdown through amaranth. The grain that closes this list was not the food of warriors planning a campaign. It was the emergency provision for an army already broken. A king fleeing through the wilderness with men who had nothing left. Item 1. Barley. King David was fleeing for his life through the unforgiving wilderness when his men reached a point of absolute physical collapse. The 17th chapter of 2 Samuel describes him arriving in the city of Mahanaim. His army was hungry, weary, and completely drained of stamina. His loyal supporters rushed to bring him heavy supplies to keep his men moving. The very first provision listed in the text is a massive quantity of barley. They understood that an exhausted army needed the thickest and most rugged grain available to anchor their bodies for the fight ahead. Barley is completely loaded with a dense plant fiber called beta-glucan. When beta-glucan enters your stomach, it absorbs water and forms a thick, slow-moving gel that physically lines your digestive tract. This gel acts as a powerful and sustained energy anchor, releasing fuel so slowly and steadily that sudden stamina crashes become almost impossible. Barley beta-glucan significantly extended the time to exhaustion during rigorous physical endurance trials. Nutrients published that finding in 2020. The people of Mahanaim brought this specific grain to a king whose survival depended on keeping his men on their feet. You can experience this deep, stabilizing effect by making a rich beef and barley stew for your next evening meal. The food that kept an ancient army marching is the exact fuel you need to remain strong and steady all day. 10 civilizations, 5 continents, thousands of years of separation. Not one of them had access to a modern laboratory. Not one of them had a nutritional scientist or a peer-reviewed journal. They arrived at the same conclusions independently. Iron-rich teff for oxygen delivery, resistant starch for slow fuel, beta-glucan for physical endurance, squalene for cellular protection. Different grains, different continents, different languages, the same biological logic. Please remember that these are foods with thousands of years of documented use and peer-reviewed research behind them, not medical prescriptions. But 5,000 years of independent human agreement is its own kind of evidence. The ancient world did not arrive at these answers by accident. They arrived at them because the answers work. The exact grains designed to sustain human health have been growing in the soil of every continent on Earth since the beginning of recorded history. We simply stopped eating them. Which of these ancient grains surprised you the most? And have you ever tried cooking with roasted green freekeh or whole emmer wheat? Let me know down in the comments, because I read every single one of them. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on this forgotten wisdom. Click the video on your screen right now to discover the specific ancient roots that actively support your joint health from the inside out.